Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to WASA Distance Education and ENG3E. Today we will start in on Activity 2, Journeys of Migration. And so that is, we lost our, darn it. Okay, well, I'll just have to quickly fix that, okay, with my page number. I don't know why it keeps disappearing on me. Well, not a problem. We got that sorted out. Um, so, at the bottom of page 6, Journeys of Migration. Let's read this together. In this activity, you will explore the story Alone on the Ocean and examine the theme of resilience through Donna's experiences as a refugee. You will think about what it means to face hardship and how overwhelming challenges can shape a person's strength. Using an atlas or map, you will identify Vietnam, Malaysia, and other nearby countries to better understand the setting of Donna's journey. You'll also learn why many families left Vietnam to come to Canada and what struggles they faced along the way. Finally, you will write a structured paragraph that explains Donna's physical and emotional journey, showing both empathy and understanding. By the end of this activity, you should be able to explain the meaning of resilience in Donna's story using maps to identify key locations, connect the refugee experience to real life challenges, and write a clear paragraph with the topic sentence supporting details and conclusions. So, what about for outcomes? What students will learn or achieve? By the end of this activity, students will be able to interpret the theme of resilience by making inferences from characters' experiences in Alone on the Ocean. They will be able to identify Vietnam, Malaysia, and other countries in the region using an atlas map demonstrating geographical awareness. They will be able to explain refugee experiences by connecting hardships, reasons for leaving home, and settlement challenges. They will be able to write a structured paragraph summarizing Donna's physical and emotional journey, showing understanding and empathy, as well as apply conventions of clear written communication, such as in your paragraphs, topic, sentence, supporting details, conclusion, grammar mechanics. And so once you complete the key question, you will know that you're successful when you can explain what Donna's father meant about resilience and hardship, that you can locate Vietnam, Malaysia, and 3 nearby countries on a map. You'll be successful when you can explain how many people wanted to leave Vietnam for Canada. I can describe that, and you'll be successful when you can describe Donna's journey in at least one paragraph of 6 or more sentences, and you can make inferences about Donna's emotional journey, not just the physical journey. And of course, you'll be able to use topic sentence, supporting details, and a concluding thought. And of course, as always, you can spell and punctuate correctly most of the time. So I'm going to read this story for you today, Alone on the Ocean. And it is in your road ahead, page 111. the 114. Okay. Alone on the Ocean by Donna, spelled with a P, Phung. You can access this by um, opening up to page 111. My escape from Vietnam was the most dangerous and most difficult experience of my life. At dawn on October 14th, 1978, my mother, brother, cousin, and I left Vietnam, each of us carrying a small bag of clothes and another bag of dry food and water. We gathered today at the place where we had registered with the government and waited for the bus to the port. I was surprised by the number of people who were also waiting there. The people were all excited when the buses came. We packed ourselves on the bus because we were afraid to be left behind. Our bus started to go, followed by my father, uncle, and cousin on motorcycles. Our hearts were all as heavy as the overloaded bus. When we arrived at an unknown port in a small village, we were met by some officers who called our names and studied our faces, matching them with pictures on their list before they allowed us to board. That was the moment that I felt very concerned about leaving my father. I swallowed my tears and kept my eyes shut. My heart was crying bitterly inside as if hundreds of blades were cutting it. Then my father said to me and my brother, "You have to listen to your mother and take care of each other. Do not complain about any hardships because the most bitter of the bitter you suffer will make you into the best people." It was as heavy as a stone when I heard these words. Suddenly, I heard our names being called and we kissed each other goodbye. We dragged ourselves on the boat with heavy footsteps. We started our adventure on a small boat only 60 feet long. It carried 230 people. Our baggage and food were thrown into the cabin, and the women and children were forced to jump down into the cargo hold. It was all in darkness, and we could just sit on the floor with bent knees. Soon the boat was filled with people packed in like sardines. I fell asleep as the boat swayed. Soon everyone got seasick and babies began to cry. My throat was burning so much that I needed water. For 2 days I could not put anything in my stomach. On the third day I needed to go to the washroom, so people on the deck pulled me out. I felt as if I were being freed from hell, and that it had been years since I had fresh air. Greedily I inhaled the fresh sea breeze. I decided not to go back down into the hold anymore, and so I hid in the corner by the rail. We were all alone on the Pacific Ocean. It was only an endless view of water and sky. I often saw dolphins leaping around our boat, but to me they seemed evil rather than playful. In the night there was a storm with heavy rain pouring down and gusty wind blowing so sharply I was quivering and chattering all night long. On the fourth day we saw from some large ships not far away. Eagerly we put up the SOS flag to ask for help, but they all steered away from us at full speed as if they had just seen a group of violent animals. I was so depressed by their indifference and selfishness. Perhaps they were afraid that they would have to share food with us. With disappointment again and again, we went on and on and on, slowly under the fiery sun. Once we thought we were in luck because we saw a glistening boat which looked like an island. As we got closer, we found that it was a gigantic aircraft carrier. Even its life raft was bigger than our boat. We used all our strength to shout out to get the sailors' attention. When a few people came out, our captain spoke English to them to explain our situation and begged them to let us on board because our boat had lost its direction. But they refused to accept us and pointed in the direction of Malaysia. The next morning, we were happier because we saw some mountains and seagulls, which suggested that there were people not far away. In a few hours, we saw two Malaysian fishing boats, and the fishermen helped us land on an island. I expected to be met with delicious foods and drinks, but the Malaysians did not welcome us and instead guarded us closely with rifles as if we were criminals. We had to continue our boat life even though we were on the land because we had to share the little water that was left over. That night we slept on the sand facing the beach under the open sky. I felt sad because only beggars did that in my native country. We were noticed by a patrolling boat the next morning. Some Malaysian officers landed with guns pointing at us and searched our baggage to see if we had any gunpowder. They were very severe and ordered us to get back into our boat and leave that island. But fortunately, our boat was damaged and could no longer move. Then they sent 3 motorboats to take us to a Vietnamese refugee camp, which was far away from any town. Bai Dong was an island with nothing but mountains and trees. By the time we got there were more than 10,000 Vietnamese occupying the place. The trees at the foot of the foot of the hills had been cut down for cooking. Spaces were built for plastic tents, so we were assigned to go up and live in the mountain where we cleared the land. The Malaysian soldiers were corrupt. They changed our US dollars into Malaysian money and bought our jewelry for very low prices. Besides, they sold us unnecessary products such as food at very high prices. But we had no choice because we needed all these things to survive. Life in the concentration camp was similar to Robinson Crusoe's. We had to build our tents with some long branches and sleep on the ground. We had to climb over the hill to get a bath in a stream. We had to cut down trees to get wood for cooking, and we had to get water from the wells. If it was raining, we had to cook under the tent and stay outside in the rain. Life was so hard that we had nothing to worry about, but the life was so hard that we had nothing to worry about but the next meal. The Canadian High Commission decided our fate. We had been waiting for 2 months to meet the Canadian delegation, but they visited the island just once a month and could only interview a few families. We were supposed to wait at least 1 year for an interview. However, we had brought proof of sponsorship of my aunt in Canada. It was very hard to talk to the officials, but they did not meet anybody except those whose names they called. One day, my brother and I waited outside until one of them came out for some fresh air. Although he did not speak English that well at the moment, we understood it. He understood us when we when he saw the sponsorship form. Immediately, he had an interview with my family, and after asking some questions and filling in some forms, we were accepted. We were all so delighted that we could not sleep at night. Our names were called to leave for Canada a few days after the interview. We could hardly believe it until our names were called again and again through the loudspeakers. We immediately picked up and left the evil island for a small town. We were put in a big villa with about 200 people who were all also accepted for Canada. We waited there for about 2 months as they checked our health. The supplies there were sufficient, and we could buy some things at the local stores. We enjoyed living there more than at Bidong, and so 2 months passed very quickly. One day our names were added to a list of those going to the capital for some documents and then to Canada. The day I left Malaysia was the most meaningful day for me. When I stepped onto the plane, I knew that all the evil and hardship were left behind me forever and glorious days were waiting for me ahead. I've been living now in Canada for 2 years and have grown to love this country, but I feel guilty about the material comforts and the freedom I enjoy here while my father is suffering in Vietnam. I will also, whatever strength I have left to get my, I will use whatever strength I have left to get my father out as soon as possible. I also pray that those still on the sea are secure. My escape from Vietnam by sea will haunt me until the day I die. And this was, of course, why were all these Vietnam people escaping and coming to Canada? Well, this was around, of course, the close of the Vietnam War. So South of Vietnam fought against the North for quite a prolonged period of time. But when the government finally fell and the North overran the South, well, a lot of the people who were living and had sided with the South Vietnamese government, they were now treated like criminals by the communist regime. Many were executed. Many escaped initially, but over time, they others figured out ways how to get out, and it looks like this is how this particular family did that. I wonder after when I'm reading the story, was the lady who wrote this able to reunite with her father? Were they able to sponsor him to come over to our country afterwards? So this was written quite a long time ago, or the story took place in 1978. That's almost 50 years ago, right? And I think the Vietnam War was over around in 72. But I remember back then reading stories about what they called the Vietnamese boat people, right? And these are like other groups of Vietnamese people who came over in cheap, larger boats than the one that this lady had been in, small ocean boats. It'd be where they could fit like several hundred or close to 1,000 people in the ship. And sometimes countries wouldn't allow them to let the people off, and people would die that way through starvation and exposure to the elements, ships sinking. But all these people just wanted to get out of their families were being persecuted and killed, and that's a lot went, of course, to the United States as well, right? But Canada was, some other people favored Canada, especially if they had family members here. If you go down the United States in Louisiana, there's a huge Vietnamese population down in southern Louisiana and New Orleans. And it is from these people who escaped from Vietnam. And you know what? The United States owed those people that after they had gotten their support during the Americanization of Vietnam, and then the Americans left them, deserted them. So those Vietnamese people have gone through a couple generations now, right? And like here in Canada, there are lots of naturalized Vietnamese people who whose parents came over here as refugees and immigrants. Anyways, so that's a interesting story to read about. So it says in for question number 1 on page 8, in the story Alone on the Ocean, Donna's father says to her and her brother, "Do not complain about any hardships because the most bitter of the bitter you suffer will make you the best people." And think about all the hardships that Donna and her family, the family that was with her, had to face. And there's a number of examples that are giving in the story, right? Right? And what was her father saying? He's saying, you know, don't complain. I mean, complaining won't get you anywhere. But the hardships are going to affect your personality, your attitudes, your future, and your relationships with other people. And it's really true. People who often have to go through hardships like this in life develop a certain depth to them that, uh, they've seen things and they learn to empathize more with people who are in the same boat as them. Anyway, so you think about that yourself and complete at least 3 sentences, or at least 2 sentences, sorry. And what do you think Donna's father meant by that statement? Number 2, using an atlas or map of the world, locate the countries of Vietnam and Malaysia. Those were the 2 countries, besides Canada, that were mentioned in the story. Identify 3 other countries that are found in this region of the world. Well, let's just quickly do that, okay? All right. We'll just simply do map of Vietnam on Google. Okay, there it is right there. I'll just make that larger for you. Okay, there's Vietnam. There's the south. Ho Chi Minh City used to be called Saigon, right? So if you follow this dark gray line here all the way up. It's a long, narrow country at this point, right? And then it spreads out again, and this is Hanoi. Was the capital city of North Vietnam. And it's funny, you go through these different names of cities here. Da Nang, very lots of battles fought there during the Vietnam War. Okay, so it's this long, narrow country, but it's all bordered. Half of it's bordered by the ocean. I'll just zoom out here a bit. Right, so that's the South China Sea, part of the Pacific Ocean. Right. Okay, so if we look for other countries in the area, of course, there's China is immediately north of Vietnam. Right, there's Hong Kong right there, Taiwan across the strait here. I don't know what that strait's called. Taiwan, and then we have the Philippines down immediately off the coast here as well. Oh, it's probably, 1,000 kilometers or so, though. That's quite a distance from here to Toronto. Let's go inland here. There's Cambodia right here at the bottom, right? This one right here. I'm just circumventing it with my mouse cursor here, right? So Cambodia was another place that people suffered greatly, and I don't think as many people from Cambodia escaped the persecution that happened in that country around the same time as the Vietnam War or shortly after it. All right, and then up here we have Laos, north of Vietnam, or I guess it would be west of Vietnam. And, okay, let's see, Burma over here, Thailand on the other side of Laos from Vietnam. Now, where's Malaysia that we just heard about? Well, you have to go down. Okay, so here's South Vietnam right here. And then you'd have to go across this Gulf of Thailand. Right, so that looks to me like, well, it depends on where they disembark, but it'd probably be pretty close to 700, 800 kilometers to get to Malaysia as the crow flies, right? So the island that they landed on, I don't know where that was, what that's called. It could have been any, there's lots of islands there in Malaysia. Malaysia is like, well, there's only a narrow isthmus right here that connects it with Thailand. But for the most part, this whole big chunk over here is actually, oh, and this island down here, and I'm going to, there we go. Okay, so this is all part of Malaysia as well. Okay, so here's the area from a far away shot. Hopefully you'll find that helpful, but you should be able to access this by just simply doing a search for Vietnam map, and you'll be able to probably get that same map up and have a look around. Okay. Number three, why do you think so many people were wanting to leave her country, her own country of Vietnam, with a goal of coming to Canada to live? Well, they must have heard, obviously, about Canada, and so a lot may have had relatives here. And I did explain and just mention to you about what was happening in Vietnam after the Vietnam War and why so many people had to get out of there or face persecution, and not just persecution, but but for certain death, right? And people would just walk up to you and shoot you. You know, there was great animosity between the people who took over Vietnam and the people who had originally been in the South. No one really knows how many millions were killed like that, assassinated by their northern brethren. But Canada's always been a welcoming country for immigrants and refugees. We're actually quite famous for that. I mean, it's probably pretty scary for people to come over from Asia here and who are used to, a nice warm climate. You can sleep outside on the floor, like she was talking about in this story, and come to a country where you had to put a lot of your efforts and money into having a nice warm home to keep yourself from freezing in the winter. And you pay a large proportion of your earnings on your home and heating. So a lot of people who come from other countries to our country, it's quite shocking. And often they have left other family members at home. They don't have support groups. They're all by themselves. So if you talk to uh, some of the folks up in Johnny's, for instance, who are working here, um, they're not refugees, but they're immigrant, and they're here all by themselves. They don't have any family. Um, uh, Pretty hard to raise kids without a family, or you know that's why many of them have to take a couple of jobs to survive. Work 12, 14 hours a day with the hope that everything's going to improve. And generally, it does improve, right? In Canada, it can improve if you work hard, and um, that's just the way it goes. So, anyways, enough said about that. Um, so, generally, people come to our country because they want a better life. Now, many of them have been persecuted. Not all, but many have been persecuted for could be religious reasons or political reasons. Now, a very important question here is the next one. Briefly describe Donna's journey, physical and emotional. Right, so these are two criteria that you need to include from its beginning in Vietnam. All right, so we have done numerous summaries in this course already, and we're asking you to do another one here as well. So you want to make sure you include their physical and emotional struggles in the actual summary itself. So that is the criteria, and it needs to follow that sequential um, the sequential steps of Vietnam to Malaysia to Canada. So we're just asking for 6 sentences here. So you have to pretty well summarize it. Um, Pretty good. What do I mean by pretty good? You Well, you're just focusing on the physical and emotional, right? So you can leave out a lot of the other stuff, right? So I mean, of course, that what her that advice that her father offered her, that might be a good way to start off your summary. But you can also talk about what it was like on the boats and the crampedness of the quarters and how the Malaysian police treated the refugees, and then all their struggles out in the open ocean trying to get people to help them. These are all physical and emotional things. Like, so you pick them out and write it in a nice orderly paragraph, though, with your topic sentence. Your You'll have at least four uh, uh, sentences that support your topic sentence, and then a concluding sentence, right? Every good paragraph has to have a good concluding sentence. So before we leave here, though, I would like to show you some examples of migration. Because humanity has been migrating for tens, hundreds of thousands of years, right? So, of course, it's an agreement that all our ancestors come from this area right here. That is modern human beings, right? There was other species of humans, but the modern human beings came from this area right here, 200,000 years ago. And that's in East Africa. And then they immigrated, right? And a lot of times they were just looking for better food because it became overpopulated here, or there might have been environmental disasters, and then they moved around. They moved into, of course, um, Mesopotamia and the um, Fertile Crescent, it was called, and Turkey. These were prime places where people had moved into to survive, and there was good food there. They were able to grow crops. Some of them went into Europe here, right? And then a whole bunch went to the north, right, to uh, northern Russia, and some went down into India and Asia, right here, 40,000 years ago, long time ago. And then up they went to and went over the Neo-Siberian, uh, East Asian, Southern Asian areas, down into Australia around, 50,000 years ago, and then across North America from Alaska. And we're talking, between 20 and 30,000 years ago, and then down into South America. Some people say that other groups went right across from Australia to South America as well. But these are huge migrations. And all of these different areas too had different um, smaller migrations, right? Here's another map here. Hmm. That shows you. It just kind of highlights the years, right? That people were moving around. So once again, in East Africa, 200,000 years ago, the first modern people, right? um, and then, you know, 50 to 45,000 years ago, people were moving into Europe and into China, and there was already, humanoids there as previous to that, but not what they call modern human beings. And then they moved up into right northern countries 25,000 years ago to actually Old Crow in the Yukon was one of the first inhabited places in North America. You wonder why? One of the reasons I think that no one lived in North America before that was because of that huge asteroid that impacted somewhere in, well, I'm not sure where it was, and it could have been in the southern United States or in middle America here. A huge asteroid pretty well wiped out all life in North America and did a pretty good job at knocking down a lot of people in Europe and Asia as well because all of a sudden there was no sunlight. Okay, well, I'm no anthropologist, and but that is just what people are speculating. What else do we got here? Oh, this is an interesting map. Okay, so the top map here shows world migration from the World Migration Report of 2022. Right, shows all of the conflict displacement. So people trying to escape from where there was conflict, like war or criminal gangs or things like that, right? Look at that in Central Africa, right? There's all kinds of horrendous wars and injustices there, and people have had to move from their homes because they were persecuted. One tribe persecuting the other. There's a in Pakistan here, right? Um, and of course, up here, that would be Palestine and other countries like that, and some Central American countries like Mexico. The bottom one here shows disaster displacement. So people often leave their home because of the conflict, but also because of disasters. And even in the United States, right? There's disasters that happen in Florida, hurricanes. People get up and leave after the homes are destroyed. But that's pretty well spread. Notice how that is spread all over the world somewhat evenly. Like some of these remote areas, there's not very many people living there. The same even with Australia here. As part of Australia, there's not very many people here. Not very many people in northern Africa. Not very many people in the central part of South America, because that's where the Amazon rainforest is. So not very populated in the areas here that don't show the little blue dots. So other than that, it's all spread out pretty evenly here um, for disasters. Okay, and I just have one more I want to show you. All right, and so World Migration Report from 2022, who received the most migrants and millions, um, or the top 20 destinations. The number one, of course, is United States of America, and it's horrible what's going on there right now because someone has just flipped the whole idea of um, the meaning of the United States of America, and now they're throwing all the migrants out. Surprisingly, Germany has a very high migration rate, um, and then Canada's down about number 7 or 8 there, taking migrants in. Now, the top country that um, where migrants come from, surprisingly, is India. Well, India is very overpopulated, right? And if it's hard for people to get by there, there's a lot of poverty, and people want to escape and come to a place where they can work hard and get ahead. Mexico, that's surprising, but um, Russian Federation, well, for sure you can understand why people want to get out of there. Um, China, right? Syria, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Ukraine, well, we can understand that as well. Um, People escaping from all kinds of injustices and wars and things like that. Anyways, I wanted to show you that so you could get an idea of where people are coming from, migrating to this country, and why they are migrating to this country, and it kind of gives us some kind of background for the story that you're going to read. Well, that's all I have to cover for today then. I'd like to thank you for joining us and listening in, and we'll be back next week at the same time. Have a great weekend, everyone. Stay warm. We'll talk to you Monday at the same time. Bye for now.